It's hard to believe that just a short time ago, hell was unleashed here on earth. It was called the Holocaust. And although few survivors remain today, generations are still suffering. What you're about to see and hear may shock you, but it is vital that we never forget the horror of the Holocaust.
I was 14 years old when I survived the Holocaust. And one of the reasons at that time I wasn't talking about it is because who was going to believe a 14-year-old child, such a nightmare?
I was born in one of the death camps, Nazi Germany. I was experiment on it. That's when my life begins, in a death camp.
When the Nazis were advancing towards Russia, they would go ahead and they would literally liquidate whole villages of Jews on the way into Russia as they were advancing. And so one of those villages was the village called Kibishik, where my grandparents come from.
In both sides of the families, people were lost, but by far in my mother's side, hardly anybody made it.
I don't have a lot of extended family here because it takes a few generations to develop that, and Hitler just killed off everything.
And my father was 13 when World War II broke out. Literally, he was thrust into World War II, standing outside and watching the Nazis come in and invade his country.
The flames were everywhere, and of course, a lot of people in Warsaw knew, even if they lived far away, because the wind carried a lot of ash. And we knew that there was a hell going on.
When I came into the camp in 1944 in Auschwitz, and I had my first experience watching innocent children die, I was very angry with God. I was angry with him for allowing for these people to do this.
My mother was smuggled on Nazi Germany by nuns when she was a young girl, and her sister was smuggled as well, and she was indelibly marked by all that.
In the summer of 1941, which is, they call it the deadly summer, in one summer and 2 months, 40,000 Jews were sent to the ghetto Vilna, okay? So some of those little boys that were my uncles, they were sent to the ghetto Vilna, and they were trying to escape Vilna. Unfortunately, it was already too late.
And they rounded up the whole Jewish community, mothers, children, fathers, grandfathers, wouldn't matter, babies, wouldn't matter what their age was, made them strip naked completely, and they dug a mass grave, and they machine gunned down every single person in the village.
What I think is amazing is that my father decided to join the resistance, even though he didn't have to. And he said he wanted to stay and fight for his country and fight with his comrades and fight sheer evil.
There wasn't a patriotism at the time, it was the obligation.
In Lithuania, there were 228,000 Jews. 94% were exterminated. Just the numbers, and you understand that this is a shocking numbers.
Lithuania was the great theological seminaries of Judaism for hundreds of years, and so it was prime pickings for the Nazis. When they came in, they were able to, and they came in there fairly early in the war, they were able to literally wipe out and obliterate the cream of Jewish religious leadership.
To me, the Holocaust in the Ukraine is worse. They rounded up Jews and they pretty much buried alive many of them.
6 million Jewish people were murdered during that time period, and there were 5 million other people who were also murdered.
And here's the scariest and most horrifying thing to me of the 6 million, that 1.5 million of the 6 were little children.
God had a calling for them. God had a specific path of life that He had from them. And all of this was cut off and was destroyed in a blink of an eye. And I realized they are not just statistics. None of those people are statistics. There are names that God given them.
There was a lot of bad things that happened to me. There was a lot of unforeseen circumstances that happened that are actually unbelievable.
I was separated from my mother, and I was put in orphanages and prison and beaten, torture, rape, and not allowed to go to school. Didn't know how to read and write, only spoke Polish and a little bit Russian. And the life was living hell.
It was a miracle that I lived. I lived where hunger and thirst and death was constantly around me. And I lived through it.
They did everything they could to survive.
We crawled, we tiptoed very quietly, and Germans apparently got tired of shooting at us because suddenly got very quiet. And somebody says, oh my God, they're gonna attack, and we're out of positions, and before we even escape, and we had no idea where we're going to escape to.
There was no place to escape above ground, so we escaped through the sewers.
My mother told me some of the things they were, they had to beg, they had to, you know, going through whatever they could just to get by.
What got me through it was that there was another little Holocaust survivor. She was about 6 years of age, and I was the same age. And she gave me hope.
Everything that I experienced and I saw, everything I endured, and I got through it was with God's help, because I couldn't have done it on my own.
After 5 years of war and 6 months starving in a prisoner of war camp, at 90 pounds and 6 feet tall, my dad escaped. And ultimately was in the woods, saw a plane come by, thought it was a German plane, and luckily it turned out to be a American plane.
We all started jumping up and down, hugging each other. So after all that misery, we happened to just hit the jackpot.
When the Americans liberated me, the American army, and I wasn't sure yet that I was free, but I had the feeling that they were my friends, that they weren't gonna hurt me. And that's when I looked up to heaven, and the first time after that day, said, thank you, God, for watching over us.
The world continue on, life continue on, but those people who went through this thing never ever recover. And I can look at even my mother and say she has never ever recovered from this.
My memories of Mother are smoking cigarettes nonstop, pill bottles, laying around in bed, wound up dying in a mental hospital.
As life went on, I started to rebuild my life and rebuild a new family, create a new family, because I lost all my family. And I didn't want that, my past, to be part of my future in my family. I didn't want, after I have children, I didn't want them to know, because I didn't want them to live in my pain.
My mother never opened up until the very, very last days. She recently passed away.
We said we could get Mom out of Germany, but we had trouble getting Germany out of Mom.
I remember a few weeks before she passed, she started telling me and telling me and telling me and telling me. And she could barely even speak. But she said, listen, it's really important that you know this, so you can share it with your son.
My sisters, half-sisters, present me with the ashes of my mother. And they said that Mama wanted to be buried in the Stutthof death camp because she wanted to be with those women who died over there.
that's when really I think there was a really turnaround. It's just like a scar that never fully was healed until the very, very last days.
To entering to your own death camp, pull your papers, and that's where you were born, that's where you were experimented, and it was just, I lost it.
For decades, I did not have a father present in my life. I could see that he was physically traumatized by all the scars all over his body, but also emotionally traumatized, so much so that he put this wall of silence and didn't talk with anyone about it, not even my mother, certainly not us.
To explain to your children what happened, that was the hardest thing. My children almost lost it. They almost separated themselves from God. They don't even want to have nothing to do with the Jews and Christianity, nothing, you know, and it was hard for me.
When my mother passed away, it was almost as if a stranger died. My father was completely numb.
My children, when they found out that I was a Holocaust survivor, they just did not ever, they didn't ask me again anything else about the Holocaust because they were so angry that they did this to me that they didn't want to know anymore.
It wasn't until I reached out and said, I want to learn what you went through. I want to learn who you are. I want to learn who I am, that I found my father, and I found a loving man after he's been able to finally be free and share the story.
There are 4 diamonds mounted in this teardrop-shaped necklace that my mother gave me before we went to the camps. And because when they told us that we are going to the vineyard to work in the factories, she said, if you get hungry, these diamonds are in your skirt, sewn in. So if we work in separate places and you get hungry, buy bread for these diamonds. But I could not buy bread for the diamonds the whole time I was in the death camps because the bread was more precious than the diamonds. And it would have been safer if I threw them away. But the love and the strength that they carried was stronger than the Nazi hatred. So I swallowed and retrieved the diamonds as many times as I had to, and I have them today. They are to be given to each firstborn girl in my family forever and ever. They're never are allowed to sell them or trade them unless, God forbid, they are hungry. They are to buy bread.
Here I am in my 40s, and I finally feel that I have a father in my life. As a result of him finally sharing this story, after 65 years of silence in his life, it's enabled the 2 of us to finally get to know each other.
I'm so glad you came back.
More on the horror of the Holocaust when we return. Stay with us. When hearing the personal stories of the Holocaust, one cannot help but wonder, how did such a senseless tragedy happen? And what are the warning signs we need to be aware of for the future?
We must remember the horror of the Holocaust so that it's never, ever repeated again. And we must remember those who survived, the unimaginable, because they're only with us a short while.
It has to be told and retold and showed and reshowed so people never forget.
I think it's important that people remember the Holocaust itself, simply to be reminded of the fact that people can do evil things. And by virtue of good people doing nothing, they can allow evil things to happen.
If somehow this crazy lie can be believed that the Holocaust never happened, it almost invalidates the whole cry of saying never again. What do you mean never again? Nothing ever happened in the first place. It's all exaggerated. It's all lies, which actually paves the way for fresh persecution of Jewish people. Because if there never was a Holocaust, then what is there to prevent? And so it's very subtle, but very insidious and very evil.
Anyone with a sensitivity, anyone with aware of the fragility of God's civilization and how easily it can descend to barbarism has a personal relationship with the Holocaust.
1,200 civilians walked from the neighboring city of Weimar to begin a forced tour of the camp. There are many smiling faces, and according to observers, at first the Germans act as though this was something being staged for their benefit. These people are compelled to see what their own government had perpetrated. One of the first things that the German civilians, as they reach the interior of the camp, is the parchment display. On a table for all to gaze upon is a lampshade made of human skin, made at the request of an SS officer's wife.
The mantra in Germany was, we just didn't know. The question is, how do you move 6 million people? How do you dispossess millions of them, hand over their properties to others, move them around through the rail and what have you to get people to these camps? Most people just wanted to look the other way.
This is really just about the Jewish people. It's about everyone, because if we had stood up to the hatred being directed against the Jewish people, we may have been able to stop a war that also killed Gentiles, you know, and gypsies and everyone else.
The Nazis, when they first came in, it was first they started shutting down the schools.
Every day in all German classrooms,
and then they started shutting down the churches, and it was sort of slowly chipping away at society.
Our Führer is the intermediary between his people and the throne of God. Everything the Führer utters is religion in the highest sense.
The Jews didn't really, sadly enough, didn't really take seriously what was going on in Nazi Germany. When Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, you know, which was just diabolical anti-Semitic rantings, basically. And they say, oh, well, it's just nothing really, it's just words, it's just threats.
If you read the writings, if you listen to some of the speeches he gave in Nuremberg at the outside auditorium, he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing and was very determined to rid the world of the people of the Torah, the people of the book.
Many of the Jews in Germany were actually Polish Jews originally. And they moved from Poland to Germany because they were told, and it was the case before Hitler came into power, Germany is much more tolerant and less anti-Semitic than Poland. Yeah.
And if we think about it, it's so striking. Where did the Holocaust launch itself? Not in Poland, which was a multi-generational, multi-century haven of anti-Semitism. It took place in Germany, that's where it started, where Jews were totally integrated. They were citizens with full rights. Jews were an essential part of the Kaiser's army in World War I. If there was one place that this horror could be launched from, nobody would have ever guessed Germany, the home of enlightenment.
Their leaders told them that they were Supermen, the master race, destined to rule all other peoples on earth.
The more secular you become, the less respect you have for God-given rights. And whether that be the inherent dignity of the individual and all the individualism, as Germany became more secular, they moved more towards saying, oh, those aren't people. The Jews, they aren't people, that they're animals. And you lose your God-given view of human beings. And when you do that, you won't protect their rights. And that's what happened in Germany.
Stop thinking and follow me, cried Hitler. I will make you masters of the world.
You see when people stand by and allow abuse to happen, allow discrimination to happen, then it's as if people feel like that they've been given permission.
The Holocaust was caused by indifference.
In some ways, indifference is worse than hate.
You know, the opposite of love isn't hatred, it's indifference. You just don't care.
Indifference in any area has the terribly dangerous potential of contagion, of spreading, becoming infectious, and us becoming indifferent in many areas.
A little bit of racism, a little bit of prejudice plants bad seed in people. Little attitudes. You know, it can start off with a small little attitude.
And little by little, you slide into this godless zone of zombie-like indifference to life in all its power and in all its passion.
It's like the proverbial frog boiling in water. You know, you just turn the heat up a little bit at a time, and before long, you're dead.
The lesson we should learn is that indifference against any person is just wrong, and we're allowing it by being silent when it happens.
Stay with us for more Holocaust, Horror to Hope. We'll be right back. The images and stories from the Holocaust are shocking and unimaginable. They serve as a grim reminder of the past and even leave some asking, could this happen again? How can we guard future generations from ever having to go through this?
The Holocaust isn't just about remembering something terrible that happened. It's a picture of what will happen if we remain silent.
The difficulty you have in every single nation is you become so accustomed to what you have, you just assume it'll always be there. I mean, we've had our Constitution for 220 years. We're in great shape. No, every single generation has to renew the covenant, renew the principles, and make them personal. As we look at Germany, Germany had a really, really, really long history. And I'm sure sitting where they sit, no way will we ever do this. But it happens a little bit at a time. The Bible teaches us that a little leaven leavens the whole loaf. That's why you have to learn to be intolerant of certain things.
When you see those warning signs, as a Christian, we speak out. And we stand on something much greater than ourselves, and not be afraid to speak out and confront evil, because indifference often, breeds more indifference and breeds evil.
Intolerance is a really good deal. You have to be intolerant of wickedness. You have to be intolerant of bigotry and racism. You can't tolerate it.
I think the lesson is that we shouldn't tolerate even small amounts of racism and prejudice, because it can be watered and it can germinate into something very ugly.
Look, I think it's vitally important that whilst we still find ourselves awaking in the night to the nightmarish images that haunt our memories, images of the concentration camps, images of man's incalculable cruelty to man, as we listen to the rabid shrieks of frenzied fanatics of Islam promising obliteration of Jews and destruction to America, with all of that, it is so easy to find ourselves overwhelmed by a feeling of gloom and a feeling of hopelessness, and a feeling of what chance is there for the future. That's very easy. But it's important that we resist with all the energy at our disposal. We resist the tendency to fall into gloom and dismay and melancholy about the future.
It's an important reminder that you must stand up and you must stand on values, and even at tremendous cost, because that's who we are as a country and that's who we are as people.
So that's the lesson we have. Just because we've had a great Judeo-Christian relationship between Christians and Jews in America doesn't mean that survives, doesn't mean it lasts, and it doesn't mean that we can't go the same path that Germany and Europe have gone, or that the Middle East has gone. We have to be vigilant. We have to be diligent to watch for the danger and to stomp it out whenever it occurs, and we've got to do that every single generation we're alive until Christ returns if we're going to do the right thing with Israel.
The only way to make sure it will never happen again is to remain faithful to God. Let's remember it, because it is one more in a long line of calamities that have afflicted the Jewish people as part, not in violation of, but as part of their special relationship with God.
If you don't have those kind of values, if you don't have a firmness and a base in faith and a base in human dignity, then why be on this earth?
You may be going through your own tragedy. Perhaps you've endured pain from generations before you. Our prayer partners are standing by ready to pray with you. Just call the number on the screen. Thank you so much for watching. Till next time, bye-bye for today.
This has been a Daystar Television production.